Pam Bondi entered the courtroom expecting nothing more than a routine legal proceeding. Dressed professionally, she carried herself with the confidence of a seasoned attorney. But as she took her place before Judge Prescott, she quickly realized this hearing would be anything but ordinary. The judge's eyes flickered over her attire before narrowing in on the small silver cross hanging around her neck. His expression shifted, and without hesitation, he made his ruling. "Ms. Bondi, you are in violation of courtroom decorum. Religious symbols are not permitted. You are hereby fined." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Pam's brows furrowed, and she straightened her posture, refusing to accept the decision without challenge. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my cross does not disrupt these proceedings, nor violate any legal standard. The First Amendment protects my right to express my faith." Judge Prescott leaned forward, his tone cold and unwavering. "The courtroom is a place of law, not personal beliefs. Either remove it, or the fine stands." Silence fell over the room as the tension thickened. Pam glanced around, noting the expressions of those in attendance. Some shocked, some intrigued, some waiting to see if she would yield. But she was not one to back down from a fight, especially when constitutional rights were on the line. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this is not about decorum. This is about religious expression, which is protected under the Constitution. If I were wearing a small pendant with a secular design, would you demand I remove it?" Prescott's lips pressed into a thin line. He did not answer. "Furthermore," Pam continued, her voice unwavering, "there is no statute prohibiting attorneys from wearing religious symbols in court. Your ruling is not based on law. It's based on personal bias." The judge's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a stir ran through the gallery. Some spectators whispered among themselves, and even a few legal professionals in attendance exchanged knowing glances. The moment had shifted. Pam had forced the judge into a corner where his decision could no longer be justified by legal precedent. Still, Prescott wasn't ready to concede. "The fine stands, Ms. Bondi. If you wish to challenge my ruling, you may take it up with the proper channels." Pam didn't need an invitation. The next morning, before Prescott had a chance to control the narrative, Pam filed a formal appeal. Not only that, but she went public. News outlets quickly picked up the story, and within hours, legal analysts and constitutional scholars were debating the judge's decision on national television. What started as a simple courtroom exchange had become a firestorm of public scrutiny. Prescott's actions were now under a microscope, and he wasn't prepared for the backlash. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. He filed a formal complaint against Pam, accusing her of misconduct for challenging his authority. It was a move meant to intimidate her, to silence her. It didn't work. Pam responded with a legal counterstrike, citing case law, constitutional rights, and judicial overreach. Prominent attorneys and civil rights organizations rallied behind her, condemning the judge's actions. The court of public opinion was now fully engaged, and the pressure was mounting. As the controversy grew, even Prescott's colleagues began distancing themselves from his decision. Judges and legal professionals alike questioned his ruling, some outright stating that it was an abuse of power. With every passing day, the judge's grip on the situation weakened. The public demanded accountability, and legal experts warned that his actions could lead to serious consequences. Eventually, faced with mounting legal and professional consequences, Judge Prescott was forced to rescind his ruling. The fine was dropped, the complaint dismissed. But the damage to his reputation was done. His overreach had been exposed, and the legal world would not soon forget his misstep. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, emerged stronger than ever. She had not only defended her right to religious expression, but had set a precedent for others who might face similar challenges. As she walked out of the courtroom that day, her cross still hanging proudly around her neck, she knew this battle was bigger than just her. It was a reminder that rights are not granted by the government. They are protected by those willing to stand up and fight for them. Pam Bondi knew the fight wasn't over. Even with the fine rescinded and the complaint dismissed, the implications of the judge's actions ran deeper than just one case. This was about setting a precedent, about ensuring no other legal professional, or anyone for that matter, would face similar discrimination for expressing their faith. She wasted no time rallying support, reaching out to legal experts, civil rights organizations, and media outlets that had already taken an interest in the case. The momentum was on her side, and she intended to use it. As she prepared her next legal move, the backlash against Judge Prescott intensified. Investigative reporters dug into his past rulings, uncovering a pattern of questionable decisions that raised concerns about his judicial integrity. More people stepped forward, some anonymously, sharing their experiences of biased treatment. In his courtroom, what began as a single incident was now turning into a broader reckoning. Meanwhile, Prescott tried to maintain his authority, issuing statements defending his actions, insisting that his ruling had been about maintaining courtroom neutrality rather than targeting religion. But the public wasn't buying it. Legal analysts dissected his arguments, pointing out the glaring contradictions. If neutrality was truly his concern, why had other attorneys been allowed to wear personal symbols without reprimand? Why had he never before taken issue with similar expressions that weren't tied to religion? The more he spoke, the more his credibility crumbled. Pam, however, remained steadfast. She knew that to truly make a difference, she needed to push beyond her own case. Alongside a team of legal scholars and constitutional advocates, she drafted a formal petition calling for a review of judicial overreach in matters of religious expression. She presented historical cases, legal precedents, and expert testimony that underscored the importance of protecting individual rights in professional settings. The petition gained traction, drawing thousands of signatures in a matter of days. As the pressure mounted, the Judicial Review Board announced an inquiry into Prescott's conduct. It was an unprecedented move, one that sent shockwaves through the legal community. Judges were rarely scrutinized in such a public manner, but the weight of the evidence and the overwhelming public response left them little choice. The case had grown beyond one attorney's right to wear a cross. It had become a nationwide debate about the boundaries of judicial authority. In the midst of the growing controversy, Pam received an unexpected message. A former clerk who had worked under Prescott years prior wanted to meet with her. Intrigued, she agreed. When they met in a quiet cafe away from the public eye, the clerk shared a chilling account of Prescott's behind-the-scenes behavior. According to him, the judge had long held disdain for those who openly expressed their faith. He had allegedly made dismissive remarks about religious plaintiffs, subtly steering rulings in ways that undermined their positions. Though never blatant, enough to raise immediate red flags, his actions now painted a disturbing picture in light of recent events. Armed with this new information, Pam and her team prepared for the next phase. The media continued to follow the case closely, and as more details emerged, even those who had initially defended Prescott began to reconsider their stance. Public confidence in his ability to remain impartial eroded. Calls for his resignation grew louder. Then came the final blow. A whistleblower from within the courthouse leaked internal communications, revealing that Prescott had been advised against taking action against Pam, but had proceeded anyway, believing she wouldn't challenge him. The revelation confirmed what many had suspected. This wasn't about courtroom decorum. It was about personal bias and an abuse of power. Faced with mounting evidence, Prescott had no choice but to step down. His resignation was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as justice served, while others worried about the precedent it set for judicial accountability. But for Pam Bondi, the outcome was clear. Standing up for constitutional rights was never the wrong choice. In the weeks that followed, Pam continued her advocacy, using her experience to push for clearer protections for religious expression in professional environments. She spoke at legal conferences, wrote op-eds, and worked with lawmakers on policies that would prevent similar incidents in the future. Her case became a landmark example of why vigilance in protecting freedoms was essential, no matter how small. The initial infringement seemed, and through it all, the cross remained around her neck, a symbol of both her faith and her unwavering commitment to justice. As Pam Bondi's advocacy gained national attention, the impact of her fight rippled far beyond the courtroom where it all began. Legal scholars debated the implications of her case on television. Universities invited her to speak about religious freedom, and organizations dedicated to constitutional rights rallied behind her message. Pam had become more than just an attorney who stood her ground. She was now a symbol of resistance against judicial overreach and a champion for those who had been silenced in the past. But she knew that this was only the beginning. The legal battle had exposed a much deeper issue, one that needed more than just public awareness. It needed legislative change. Determined to push forward, Pam and her team began drafting a proposal aimed at ensuring that no judge could impose personal biases on matters of religious expression in the courtroom. Her proposal sought to establish clear guidelines that would prevent any future misinterpretations of the law. She met with lawmakers, civil rights attorneys, and constitutional scholars to refine her arguments, ensuring that her case could set a precedent that would be legally binding. Meanwhile, the public's support continued to grow. Social media erupted with discussions about judicial power, religious freedom, and the importance of standing up for one's rights. Letters poured in from people across the country, some from attorneys who had faced similar treatment but had been too afraid to speak out, others from individuals who saw her as an inspiration in their own personal battles for religious freedom. Yet, even as her movement gained momentum, opposition forces began to push back. Some legal experts warned that her campaign risked undermining judicial authority, arguing that judges needed discretion to maintain decorum in their courtrooms. Critics accused her of turning a legal issue into a political one, claiming that she was using the controversy to advance a personal agenda. News outlets that had initially covered her story with enthusiasm now featured debates questioning whether she had taken her fight too far. Pam was undeterred. She knew that when challenging the status quo, resistance was inevitable. As the months passed, she took her fight to Washington, meeting with senators and representatives who were willing to listen. Some were hesitant to get involved in what they saw as a politically charged issue, but others recognized the significance of her cause. Slowly, she built alliances, gaining support from influential figures who understood that protecting constitutional rights wasn't a partisan matter. It was an American principle. The pressure on lawmakers intensified as more people demanded action. Town hall meetings across the country saw citizens raising questions about judicial accountability and religious freedoms. The debate had expanded far beyond Pam's individual case. It had become a national conversation about the very nature of rights and the limits of judicial power. Then a breakthrough came. A senator who had been closely following the case agreed to introduce legislation inspired by Pam's proposal. The bill sought to establish explicit protections for religious expression in professional settings, preventing judges from penalizing attorneys, plaintiffs, or defendants for wearing religious symbols that did not disrupt proceedings. The announcement sent shockwaves through the legal community. Some hailed it as a necessary step toward preserving constitutional freedoms, while others decried it as an overreach that could tie the hands of judges. The debate intensified, but Pam remained steadfast in her mission. As hearings were scheduled for the bill, she prepared to testify before Congress. She spent weeks refining her arguments, gathering legal precedents, and ensuring that every aspect of her testimony would be unshakable. The day finally arrived, and as she sat before lawmakers, cameras broadcasting her words across the nation, she delivered a powerful speech. She spoke not just of her own experience, but of the countless others who had faced similar discrimination, but had lacked the platform to fight back. She outlined the dangers of allowing judicial overreach to go unchecked and made a compelling case for why legislative action was necessary. Her testimony came next. The applause that filled the room was not just for her victory, but for the movement she had ignited. A movement that would continue long after this moment, carried forward by those who had been empowered by her fight. In the months that followed, Pam expanded her efforts beyond the legal profession, advocating for religious freedoms in workplaces, schools, and public institutions. She worked alongside lawmakers to draft policies that protected individuals from discrimination based on their faith, ensuring that no one else would have to endure the kind of battle she had faced. Her influence stretched beyond the courtroom, reaching boardrooms, universities, and government offices, where her case was studied as an example of constitutional resilience. Yet, despite the progress, she knew that challenges would continue to arise. Laws could be passed, precedents could be set, but the fight for freedom was never truly over. There would always be those who sought to erode rights under the guise of neutrality, always voices that tried to silence expressions of faith. But now there was also a stronger force pushing back, one that she had helped to build. Years later, as she stood before another audience, this time at a university where future lawyers were preparing to enter the field, she shared her story once more. The legal battle with Judge Prescott, the courtroom debates, the national movement, the Supreme Court ruling, it had all led to this moment. Young faces watched her with determination in their eyes, ready to take up the fight in their own ways. And as she stepped down from the podium, she felt the weight of history shift, not as an ending, but as a continuation. The cross around her neck remained a symbol of everything she had endured, of the principles she had defended, and of the belief that no matter how strong the opposition, truth and justice would always prevail. With that thought, she walked forward, knowing that wherever the next battle arose, she would be ready. Never miss an episode. Subscribe now to Famous Forgotten and be part of our growing community. Hit the like button, drop a comment, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support keeps us going. Subscribe now. https://www.youtube.com/famous forgotten.